And we are back. How are ya? How are ya? It's been a while, but that's how it goes. October 14th. Fall is definitely here, at least on this side of the state. I don't know if the southern half would agree. Apparently, LA had its first severe thunderstorm warning in 17 years today. There was a tornado in the Central Valley, and we got 55 in rain for the second day in a row. But yeah, because of that, I would say fall is officially here. I always tell people living in this area is pretty much like it's like between 2 and 4 weeks in the spring and 2 and 4 weeks in the fall of living in San Diego, where it's like 70s and sunny every day. But then, depending on when you're talking about, winter and spring, it's like living in Seattle for 5 months. And then summer and usually early fall, not this year, it's like living in Phoenix for 5 months, where it's, exactly what you would expect with both. Rains every day for 5 months, and then it's like 100 degrees every day for 5 months. So when you get the coolest summer in a quarter of a century, you take it. And that's what we got. That being said, we're in the middle of the month and kind of the middle of everything. Pretty forgettable round in the championship series for baseball so far. It's missing that one signature walk-off hit or game that makes you think back, oh yeah, 2025 championship series. I remember that. Hockey just started up. Basketball starts next week. Football's in week 7 this week for NFL. I believe it's week 9 it's week 8 for college. So right in the middle of everything. And then the movie and show schedule for the month is, again, right in the middle of it. About half of what you were excited for to come out in October is out, and about half of it's still left to go. So that times out nicely. And so far, there haven't been many duds. At least none that I can speak to personally. I've heard mixed reviews on Him. Granted, I figured that one would be kind of an acquired taste. I still want to watch it, but I'm not sure how good it is. I appreciate that it's original, though. It's very different from just your average horror film. I would say, of what I've seen, though, I've been thoroughly impressed. Namely, start with the easy one. I Like Me, the bio on John Candy. That was incredible. I won't say too much about it other than it's 2 hours, so it is one of the longer bios I've ever watched, but the stories that seemingly, unless you were there to experience it yourself, you will be hearing it for the first time no matter how close you were to him, was really cool. So that part too, you think like, what could I possibly find out about John Candy that I don't know already? And I would say the answer is a lot. And that was worthwhile to watch. It's hard to watch because the guy was a giver and you knew he was a giver, but the toll it took on him, yeah, it was hard. And then obviously just in general, the ending is not what anybody wanted. I don't think it's a stretch to say forecasting he could have walked away from film, at least for a while. We've seen some of the all-time greats do that across a lot of genres, but someone like him who his personality transcended his work and he was not afraid to try other ventures, whether they succeeded or failed, and you have to respect him for that. You could definitely see him maybe venturing off, maybe something more along the lines of sports, being he was a part owner of the Toronto Argonauts at one point. So you could see something like that. But I would say it's a very fair prediction, had he still been around, that we would have gotten probably a decade of more John Candy films, and that would have been a treat. But yeah, it was definitely worth the watch. A little longer than I expected, but I was thrilled about that. And tough to watch, but also really, I would say, fulfilling. It always feels like you dig and you dig and you dig on some of these celebrities for this extra story or one more extra, quote of theirs or this or that. And you come to find like, oh, there was skeletons in the closet. And you're like, all right, well, they were great except for this one night, this one time where they just did something really inexcusable. And you're kind of forced to say, well, will I look past that, or is that like the breaking point for me as a fan? Whereas with him, you never get that. And it's pretty awesome because it just feels like the deeper they dig on stuff like that, eventually you find that one thing where it's like, oh no, that's not good. But not with him. So that part too was refreshing, I would say, is the word. But yeah, fulfilling that you can just hang on to the John Candy you view in your head and know that that was him and that is him. So that part was really fun. That being said, the one that has caught me by surprise, I wouldn't say that I expected it to be bad, but I was not ready for it to be this good, is Task. And admittedly, not necessarily my favorite genre or subgenre of drama with, government agency, morally corrupt, maybe or maybe not, person on the other side, morally corrupt, maybe or maybe not. Just feel like it's a retread storyline that just gets beaten into the ground. So typically it's not my thing, and admittedly, full disclosure, I watched it because of the trailer's usage of Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. I thought that was a really interesting mixing of it. And I thought, you know what, I'll give this show a shot. At the very least, I'll give the pilot a shot. And it started out good, and I thought, okay, sign me up. Next Sunday, let's do it again. And somehow every week has managed to be just a little bit better than the week before. And I've been amazed. It's definitely in the running for one of the best shows on TV this year. And not just this year, but last 5 years, it's right there. I was really impressed. I think the acting is great in it. Storyline's great. And I did a deep dive because it immediately, within the first 10 minutes of episode 1, reminds you a lot of Mayor of Easttown. And if you enjoyed that show, there's no way you won't love this. There's just no way. And it turned out also when I did a deep dive that the same guy, Brad Inglesby, did both. And there's a lot of overlap. They're not tied together in any way, but they both are not shy about the Delco roots of the show. And I would say everyone in the show who attempted the Delco accent nailed it too, which was pretty funny. I know SNL had a fun time with that when Mayor of Easttown initially came out, and I don't know that they probably won't do a sequel skit to that at some point with this show, but that part 2 is pretty fun. And yeah, I would recommend that. Episodes are about an hour. So if you're starting from scratch, it'll take you a little bit to catch up, but totally worth it. From there, this weekend, Black Phone 2 comes out. It's totally honest, that's the one I'm most excited for this month. Then next week is The Watchers and Shelby Oaks. I gotta be honest, I don't know a ton about that one, but I've seen some fan posters floating around that really make that one look intriguing, and I'm gonna have to give that one a shot. That being said, I'm also pretty excited the next 2 weeks or so to dive back into some guilty pleasure movies. I'm not usually a big on theme movie person outside of Halloween and Thanksgivings. There really only are like 2 Thanksgiving movies, and Halloween movies just play year round. Like, more often than not, being 99% of the time, if you try watching, I don't know, a movie about basically any December through February holiday in like June or July, if you liked it before, you're going to be pretty heartbroken when you find out, wow, this movie is just not what I thought it was. It's not as good as I like to romanticize it as. So this would be one of the few exceptions where I actually am pretty excited to watch some of the older ones that I always circle back to within the month of October. I know the one that sticks out to me at this moment, and it popped into my head last night, was 13 Ghosts. I'm not totally sure why I love that one as much as I do, but that one is one of my favorites to watch right around this time of year. And I am curious what some other people's favorites to dive back into are, because I know that one does pop up quite a bit, but there are also a few others. That being said, side note, I decided I am going to start writing 2 different stories simultaneously, unrelated, but they both kind of came into mind, and I decided it was time within the last probably month or so. One will probably get more focus because the other is just strictly from memory. That one's going to be like a recollection with, maybe it's a sci-fi twist. I don't know. Tough to say. And the beauty of that one is it's either going to make me look like the smartest human alive to people who will be alive long after I'm dead, or it's going to totally discredit everything I say ever again. But it'll be an interesting read either way, and I think that's the part that counts the most. The other will be a contemporary novel or novella. I haven't decided the length yet. I'm not sure how long I want to stretch it, but that will be contemporary, and I guess it'll be almost not subliminal, but indirect social commentary from a perspective you don't hear a lot about. Again, though, that one above that will just, I think, will be a riveting story. It has kind of a throwback feel to it, but it's very much set in the present day, which the reader will have to remind themselves probably every single time they go back to it that, no, this is set in 2025, but there are going to be a lot of details where you're like, there's no way this isn't from any sooner than 1997. But no, it's set in the present day. And yeah, I just decided late in my teens that before I died, I had to write at least one long form story, not, an excerpt or an anecdote, like full length, ideally a realistic fiction. And it could be about anything, but it had to be at least like short book length. And I realized I'm not getting any younger, so it was time to get on that. And I kind of let it marinate for about a week. And I've come up with the setting in terms of time, physical location. I've got a couple of the characters. I know the story arc, and I know the first and last lines of the story. So now it's just bridging the in-between, which is why I'm not totally sure how long I'll stretch it. But I think because it's contemporary and it dives into a lot of stuff, or maybe not dives into, but definitely touches on a lot of stuff that either a lot of people turn a blind eye to or just are completely unaware of. It'll be kind of an eye-opener for them either way. And it's got a lot of not just modern, but like right this second themes in it. So I feel like I really could stretch it. That being said, I don't want it to be a certain length just for the sake of it being a certain length, because that just goes against everything I ever ripped into every English teacher I ever had. I got into it with every English teacher I ever had growing up. I always had this line: the story will tell itself. It begins when it begins, and it ends when it's done, which sounds so much like a yogiism, and wouldn't be the first time I've dove into Yogi Berra's bag. But that being said, I always felt that because I always would see these length requirements on these stories, and sometimes it was about 50-50 by the time I graduated, at least high school anyway, where if it was some kind of creative project where you had to write a story, half of the time I would be way under, but it would feel like I chiseled out this story it's got not 1 ounce of fat on it. You're into it in the first 5 words and you're hooked until it sets you down. I felt like every now and then I would really get into it because on more than one occasion I took a lesser grade because of it. But I also went the other way a number of times where they had a length max where it's like you had to cut it down. And I just had this idea that just went beyond that. And I felt like the idea was too good to walk away from, but the length was going to cut out some intricate parts that I really wanted in there. So I always had this line, and poor every single English teacher I ever had heard it. One of them heard it twice because I had her twice. The story starts when it starts and it ends when it's done. And because of that, yeah, I'm still going to stick to that mantra with these, but it will be a fairly lengthy one. The contemporary story. The other one, I haven't totally decided how long that'll be, but we'll see how much I dive into. But that being said, yeah, I've got those I'm working on, and I'm excited to put those out. I feel like it won't take me too long once I start deciding just how intricate I'm going to be with both. But the contemporary one will come out first, and it'll be on the darker side, but I feel like that's more of a change up from what people would expect of me. So that'll be a fun read. And then the other we'll see, but probably not too much longer after that. So those will be my projects for the meantime. That being said, what's your story for the next 2 weeks?